Hey everyone, welcome to The Path of Me. I'm your host, Wendy Hutchinson. My guest today is the lovely Melissa Bonnette. She was my yoga teacher for several years. She also teaches French and history and fosters all these amazing dogs. She's got an incredible story of transformation and transitions. So I wanted to have her on. So welcome, Melissa.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm excited to have you on this show. I think a lot of people right now are going through life transitions and big ones, not just little bumps in the road, but major kind of heart-rending endings and new beginnings. And it can be so it can be so emotionally uncomfortable, exciting. There could be grief. I mean, there's so many emotions involved, right?
Yeah, change is hard.
It's so hard. But what I admire about you is how fearless you are facing every change and challenge. And the first thing I want to mention is you went to Turkey.
Yeah, I did.
And that was so bold because you went alone. And it was kind of a spur of the moment decision. And that was kind of towards the end of last year, right?
Yeah, it was right. It was Thanksgiving break at school.
Tell me about it. Tell me about what inspired that.
A lot of things. So last year was a very, very tough year. I was going through a lot of change. The first half of the year was basically like a big buildup. It was like the closest thing I could kind of compare it to would be like shaking up a can or shaking up a bottle, and then you finally hit your point where you can't take any more, like the internal pressure, and then you just bust. And so to summarize my year, I broke up with my boyfriend. I moved homes from a dangerous neighborhood to a safe neighborhood, and I kind of decided that it was no longer like in my cards to teach. And so that's within really from July to October, November.
That's literally every aspect of your life. Your home, your relationship, your career.
Wow. Yeah. And I'm a relationships person. And so for me, it was like to get to the point where I ended a 2-year relationship. It was really, really tough. And so I'd always wanted to go to Turkey, and honestly, I didn't look at flights with that in mind. I really I track flights a lot. Whenever I get really bored and I get fed up with the way things are and I get frustrated, I go and I look up flights on Google, like Google Flights, and you don't have to put a destination. You can just look up flights based off of whatever dates that you have. And you can look at a map or you look at a list. And I looked at the map and I realized I hadn't been to Europe since 2019. And that was a big year, but it was spring break 2019. I hadn't been because COVID and everything else had been happening. So I looked at it and I finally decided, I was like, oh, cool. I could fly into Thessaloniki in Greece for fairly cheap. It was about $600 round trip. So I was like, well, Greece has never been high on my priority list, and I know that might get me on someone's short list. However, it's just not been something, like I enjoy Greek culture, but it's not been something that I ever seek out. And I looked at it and looked at the map and said, wait, Thessaloniki and Istanbul are not that far away from each other. What if instead of spending a whole week in northern Greece and Macedonia, if I spend a few days over in Istanbul? And then I started looking at it going, wait, if I went and I was going to do a layover in Athens. So I was thinking I could do one day and do the Acropolis and then spend a few days in Istanbul. And then I realized, I'm like, wait, Istanbul is really, really want to go. I don't feel as drawn to all these places in Greece that are wonderful as much as I felt like I was being pulled to Istanbul. So I had a long layover in Amsterdam, and instead of going straight to Thessaloniki from Amsterdam, I flew to Istanbul instead. So I booked a flight to Istanbul and I spent 3 days there. I don't speak Turkish. I love Turkish food and I love the Hagia Sophia. The Hagia Sophia is something I've been to. It's this big church that was built by Justinian in the 6th century. And his story is kind of interesting. This is not a history podcast, but his story is like he's essentially he rebuilt the Byzantine Empire, or really was the eastern half of the Roman Empire, but that's technical. So he rebuilt it. He built this big church, and he kind of created this really strong, powerful empire that out of something that had been in decline. And so it'd been something I taught for years, and I just really wanted to go. And I started looking at a map and going, oh well, there's the Hagia Sophia right next to it is the Blue Mosque. Oh, there's the Mosque of Suleiman, the second. Oh, there's this, there's that. There's all these things that I wanted to see. And it was kind of kismet in a way, because I've been listening to a Byzantine Empire like history podcast for the last 2 years. The guy has a very monotone voice. And while it's very interesting, it also, I would use it specifically to help me fall asleep. And then so I love it. History is something that lights me up. And so I learned like some really cool things, like some really cool Byzantine like figures. There's the Queen Irene, who was a badass lady and was just kind of honestly terrifying. But she's another big figure. And so like learning about these things that I don't know, because in Western history, I was not really taught about the Greek side of the Roman Empire, and like after the fall of Rome. So I knew little bits. And so I started putting things together and going, oh, wow, this makes a lot of sense. And I was reading a book at the time. It was Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. And it's 3 different like concurrent timelines that are all being, or 3 or 4 that are all being told at the same time. But one is at the end of the Byzantine Empire, right as the Ottomans are arriving to Constantinople. So it was a really cool thing that I realized. I'm like, all of these things that I've been doing have kind of been leading me to this point. Let me do some research, because the art history class I was teaching over the last month was actually about prehistoric art all the way up until basically the end of the Byzantine Empire. So it was just like, I'm going to go and do some research. I'm going to go see it firsthand. And then also I wanted to go because I needed to get out. I needed a change of scenery and change of pace, because with so much change, like change lights me up. It makes me feel like I'm moving towards something. I have an end goal. I don't necessarily know what that end goal is, but I'm making progress. I'm not stagnant. And going there, I didn't really think about it. I didn't really think about the closest people I know are 5,000 miles away. I knew no one in Europe. Well,
Did you know anything about the transportation and so tell me about that. Like, so you get there.
I wish I could say I did, but I didn't do my full homework. I decided I was going to throw myself in, and essentially like I do to my little French 1 kiddos at school. And I didn't learn anything prior to. And so as I'm there, I'm picking up things, picking up words, learning how to like read a little bit in Turkish so I can kind of understand what things are. And it's a very European city. And so I was not 100% thrown out, but also there's a lot of people who speak English, and I'm bilingual. I speak French and English, and I speak enough Spanish to get by. And surprisingly, Spanish is a lot more common there than I was expecting. And so, yeah, wow. I actually had I went to the spice market and had a whole conversation and presentation like in Spanish, because the guy didn't speak English or French. That must have been
so cool.
Oh, it was very neat. I never thought that that's the place that I would use my Spanish. Like I figured, I'm like, oh, if anything, French, because France went everywhere and it's language like diplomacy and all that. That Istanbul is a very international city, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a different kind of international.
Sometimes when you go on these adventures, that you come back different. You say something changes in you when you actually go through different cultural immersion, and almost taking space and committing to your own desires, which a lot of people have difficulty doing when there's a cost involved and time involved. And so what was the impact of that trip on you?
Well, I was investing in myself. I was at a place where I was at work. I was finally feeling like I was feeling my oats. I was feeling myself and standing up for myself whenever I needed things from school, and was getting a lot of no. And I did a thing this last year called November, where I was a no to things that did not serve me. And
I love it.
Oh, it was great. I'm going to do it, I think, every year, because it gave me the power to say no to things that were not
aligned,
that were not aligned, that I didn't want to do and I was being asked to do. So it was really powerful. And so when I got there, like I didn't feel attractive. I didn't feel like really I was starting to feel confident in myself, but I needed a reset. And that's what it ended up being. I went there and I had not made a single plan. I did not make any plans whatsoever. I knew I wanted to do a day tour. I knew I wanted to go into the Hagia Sophia. I knew I wanted to see as much as possible. And I had booked an Airbnb near Galata Tower, but I didn't really know where that was. That was a bad part. That was a bad decision on my part, but I didn't really know where it was according to everything else. And the first night I got there, I arrived about 3 o'clock, dropped my stuff off at the Airbnb, and then I just walked around. I crossed the Galata Bridge, and I just wandered around. And so I like aligned myself with the city. I actually found the Hagia Sophia by accident, and which was a really cool thing because I ended up on the backside and did a backside tour of things. And it was really nice. But what I also got by doing that is I didn't have any plans. I was open to anything and everything that happened. And so I ended up talking to a bunch of people, and I met a lot of men, and I felt
I bet you did.
I felt very attractive at the end. The Turkish men tend to be a little bit more on the aggressive side, and I felt really beautiful by the end of the first day. So I didn't do anything with them. I ate dinner by myself. I would talk to people that were neighboring to me, like at the tables. Like I got friendly, but I mostly it was a confidence boost that I needed.
I just love it. I love it.
I would go home and I would take a nap in the middle of the day, and I would do whatever made myself happy. I ate whenever I wanted to. I got to eat whatever I wanted. And mama. And what was also really nice is that here, hold on. Stop that.
Her dogs are barking. I can't really even hear it, so it's fine.
Okay. Oh, that's fine. Okay, if you can't hear it, that's good.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
But what ended up happening is I got this dream. I had a dream, and to me, dreams have always been kind of messages, and
they're very much messages and prophetic.
And I had a dream that my ex, I finally ended things with him in July after something really awful had happened, and I got this closure dream, and
really?
I felt so I had a dream where just things were over, and the way things had ended was really kind of toxic, and it was something that I was really happy to let go of. Mm-hmm. And I had dreams where things were resolved, and I was emotionally ready to move on, which prior to that trip did not happen. I was trying to put myself out there, but my heart wasn't in it. I didn't want to use on the dream.
You were in the dream. Mm-hmm. In Istanbul. That's when you got
I had the dream.
How interesting.
It was nice because then because the dream took place here in the States, but it was like, but I'm sleeping over in Istanbul, and afterwards whenever I got back from that trip, I actually got back on the dating apps, and I threw myself into kind of dating, and I was actually ready to do it versus prior to when it felt like a chore and I just didn't want to do it. I wasn't ready. I had not received that kind of closure that I was looking for.
Yeah. So a lot happened for you that really shifted who you are and how you feel. And I think you kind of came into 2023 with this new passion for just really chasing your dreams and your truth in a way that we haven't experienced before, right?
Yeah, the way I looked at it is I got a lot of clarity on what I was looking for, both like in relationships, but also in my personal life and my job. I realized I want to be able to travel when I work, and I've always worked in a classroom or in person, and so I've never gotten the opportunity to work remotely. And
what are you thinking your direction is? That you're you have something lined up, or are you just going to see how things unfold? I think
I don't have anything lined up.
I gave my notice, right?
Yeah, I gave my notice to school. Position. So typically most hiring in education happens in March. And so I put my notice in so that way I will finish out the school year, hopefully. And then I won't be working there next year. And so that's the kind of notice I gave. And I don't know what I'm going to do just yet. I've started working with someone who revamped my resume and looked at my LinkedIn and kind of gave me some guidance because I wasn't on my own seeing a lot of results. But I'm looking at project management, and I'm looking into sales, and I'm looking into corporate training and maybe some HR stuff.
Whatever you do, you're going to be a blessing because
thank you.
You have so much experience. And also, I have a feeling, I always say this to people that I work with or clients, that when you let go of the thing that's not aligned, you create space for the thing that is to come in and enter your life, whether that's a person, a job, a home, a family member. Sometimes.
And it's hard to let go.
It is hard, isn't it?
It's like you have that, it's like a death grip. It's like a little baby when they hold on to something, when they hold on to your hair, because and they just latch in. And we'd still do that.
And then how do you process the grief of it, right? Because there's grief. And I know that you have experience with letting go of so many things in your life. What's a process that you kind of go through and grieving the end and and embracing the new?
This year's it's been different. In the past, I tend to work through things. Like I want to learn about like what happened when I lost my son in 2019. I threw myself into doula trainings and yoga trainings and just into understanding the biological like systems and everything, so that way I could learn from it. So this time it was mostly hear my dog's knocking stuff down.
Okay.
But this time it was I allowed like when I ended my relationship in July, I knew I had a few weeks until school started, and if I was going to feel things, if I was going to work through it, I needed to do it then. I needed to do it intense, so that way I could be whole while working with my students and being at my
like
job.
A very emotional intensive that you put yourself through and processing
within 2 weeks. So the day before I ended my relationship, the house that I had listed sold. So I had someone put an offer, we accepted the offer, and their options period started. So then I started looking for homes, and also I was kind of like stretching myself very thin. I had stuff going on at work where they had deleted all of my Adobe Acrobat files, and I work with Adobe to create all the workbooks that I use as textbooks for my classes.
Oh my gosh.
They had deleted everything. I had like finally decided this is the end, and I had just sold my house, and I knew I had to be out of it by the end of August. And so I didn't know where I was going to live, who I was going to be with, how I was going to do my job or anything.
That must have been so unsettling to have so many shifting sands and so many
it was ugly
parts. And how did, I guess yoga grounded you? You did a lot of yoga.
I did a lot of yoga, but honestly, I ended up kind of parting ways with the studio I was teaching at. I took all of August off, and then I just told them I'm not coming back.
Lisa, you literally ended everything in your life at once. I do not recommend people do this and follow that model. It's so much process.
It is a lot. I guess when I do things, I do them intensely. Yeah. But it was letting go of things. And within that week, I had like all these terrible things happen, but I also found the house that I live in now, and it's such a better fit. I live in such a nice little neighborhood, and it's a little bit further north than I was wanting to look in Houston, but it's turned out to be absolutely wonderful. My commute went from 45 minutes to an hour daily each way to 15 to 20 minutes.
Really?
And yeah, and I'm real close to the gym that I now go to. I'm close to everything. And so I really enjoy it. But I had, like you said, I had to let go of things in order to create space, like to find a space.
Was there a lot of grieving in letting go?
Yeah, there was. I just allowed myself to just really become like essentially an emotional, like, I don't know, an emotional committed relationship with my couch. I watched a lot of shows that were comfort shows that I had seen 2 or 3 different like times over and over again, and just watched them. I watched all the Lord of the Rings extended editions, and I had been really good about trying to force myself to go to the gym and to do things and take care of things, and I just allowed myself to feel.
I think that's the biggest thing, right?
It was hard.
Really put down the have-tos and really honor the things that you intuitively know that you need. Like if I need to cry on the couch for 3 long extended versions of Lord of the Rings, by golly,
I think I watched all 3 of them within 24 hours. That
was,
oh
my gosh.
Oh, it was a disgusting amount of TV. But I had foster dogs at the time. And so I also was taking care of these puppies that I had from the time that they were about 10 weeks old, and they were little naked chupacabra babies because they had mange and just had a lot of issues and then I had let them go during while I was selling my house, and I took them back home in the middle of July. And so it was so nice to have something to take care of, because I do like to take care of things and people and animals. And so
sometimes in the nurturing of others, you nurture yourself too.
It was what I needed, because dogs, the thing about them is that every morning my dog is so happy. My dogs are so happy to see me. It's like they have not seen me for so long. I have been gone. I have abandoned them, and I have returned. I feel like
how many do you have right now?
I have 4 right now, which it's not my typical limit. Instead of doing a leg limit, because then I know I'll bypass that because I have a tripod, and so I have 2 permanent dogs, and then I have 2 long-term fosters, and they're all about 50 pounds each. And so I decided I'm doing a weight limit instead of a leg limit or animal limit, because I'm going to find a way to bypass that. If it's a weight limit, it's like, cool, well, I can have 5, 6 puppies, or I can, and then my dogs, or I can have 4 grown-up dogs, or I can do whatever I want. But the 200 pounds is that's typically been a good ratio.
A good marker for you.
Yeah, it's been a good marker because during the freeze that happened here in December, I actually had 10 dogs at my house, and I think that was a bit much. So
you think so?
yeah,
Okay.
I loved it,
That's
Mindy.
a lot
I
of
loved
dog
it.
food. That's a lot of dog
Yeah,
food. 10 dogs.
you're not wrong. I have a big backyard. That's all I'm gonna say. And I have recommendations for a pooper scooper that I highly
Hit her
recommend.
up if you need that magic pooper scooper. If you too have
Yeah.
10 dogs, hit
Yeah,
Melissa.
but
She can
it
help
was
you.
nice. I got hit up by a bunch of different rescues that I've worked with in the past, because in Houston, like when it freezes hard and cold like that, we lose a lot of dogs, and there's a lot of puppies because we have a puppy problem in Houston. People don't like spay or neuter their dog, and so we end up with
There are
puppies year
so many
round.
dogs out running the
Mhm.
streets. Like our dog that we have, we
Mhm.
picked up on the street, you know, but he's been the best dog
Mhm.
we have ever had. I mean, what a gift. So
Mhm.
I'm grateful you
Yeah.
found something you're passionate about. And I'm also, but I kind of want to circle back because I'm always so interested in
Mhm.
who you're becoming, right? As a soul.
Mhm.
That's where I always go back to. And so all of these
Mhm.
experiences are preparing you for this coming year, right? I feel like
Mhm.
everything that you go through is almost like an initiation or a preparation for what's to come. So, since we're in the beginning of the year, what have you been wanting to create based on the foundation that
Mm.
you're building right now? I'm just
So
not
for the first, yeah.
specifically, but just energetically, and what do you want your life to feel like, you know, after going through all of this?
I want to be happy and excited. I'm happiest whenever I'm implementing change, when I'm making things better. And I'm kind of just this is the year of me. I created a vision board for the first time ever. And a
Yeah.
lot of it is taking care of myself. So it's last year in 2022, I put on about 25-30 pounds, and I'm back to the weight that I was I was back to the weight where I was whenever I had my son. And I don't like feeling that big. I felt very unhealthy. And part of it is I had allowed myself to essentially feel things, to eat things, to not go to the gym regularly, to like, in order to take care of my emotional self, I had to make space. And some of that space came from taking care of my physical body. And I'm now back to taking care of my physical body, and then like, and eating better, and it feels better already, and going to
I
the gym
love
on a regular
it.
basis, or going on walks,
I
and
love it.
realizing that I tend to deal with seasonal affective disorder because it's in February, it's normally so gray. So I spend a lot of time outside.
Mm.
I'm currently working on my back patio and making it into a space that is actually enjoyable, and instead of just a giant dirt pit. And it's been a lot of work. So the physicality of it is really helpful. And then but energetically, it makes me feel better to do the work. So doing the work is hard, but just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad. Just because it's something is easy doesn't make it bad. But to me, I always feel better whenever I'm putting in the hard work and seeing the results, because then it's something that's earned and I can appreciate a lot
But you're
more.
doing that in the gym, and you're doing that and laying all those
Mhm.
pavers, and which
Oh
I
yeah.
saw the progress photos. It looks good. Keep going. I
Thank
want to
you.
see the
Yeah,
end photo when it's
I
done.
cannot wait. I cannot wait to post an end photo, because I go out there and I wear my headphones whenever I do it, and I've been listening to Sookie Stackhouse novels, the ones that True Blood were based off of, and they're wonderful trash. Just absolutely wonderful.
You can
And
just get lost in your hard labor and your book.
I do. And so I've been listening to her books. I'm halfway through book 8, and I started it on Sunday because
Oh
I was working on stuff, and I finished book 7, which is fabulous, by the way.
amazing.
Highly recommend book 7 and book 8 of the Sookie Stackhouse novels. But
I wanted to mention that you read this book called The Immortalists, which seemed like
whoa.
they had an impact. It had an impact on you. Tell me about that.
Okay. So The Immortalist is this book by Chloe Benjamin. And I picked it up in one of those like little like local like neighborhood library, like that's on the side of the road, like kind of things. And when I read it, the premise of the book is that there are these 4 Orthodox Jewish kids that are growing up in New York, and they have a whole day like left to themselves, and they end up going and talking to this essentially kind of like a fortune teller. And the woman is known to tell you like the day that you are going to die. And so The four kids, they go in individually and they meet with her and they all get their date, and they don't share it, but they each get their date. And so out of the four kids, nothing seems to happen. Like they don't really put any kind of belief or any like they don't put any pressure on it. Well, the youngest one, who's probably I think he's like 8 or 9 whenever he finds out his date, and they flash forward to whenever he's in high school, and he drops out. He moves to San Francisco, and this is in the 80s, and he comes out as gay, and one of his sisters moves out there to be with him, but he knows his date, and turns out his date is whenever he's in his early 20s. And so because he doesn't have time, and because the expectation with his family is that he's going to take care of his mother, that he's going to, when their father dies, take over the business, that he has no interest in taking over. And he has all these responsibilities that as a high school kid, he doesn't want to do, he doesn't want to take over. So he moves across the country. He does whatever, he does what he needs to do, actually enjoys his life. And when he does pass, it's sad, but and his sister is there, but he knew. And so he made the most of it. And the rest of the siblings, it's they all have slightly different stories, and the same income, because ultimately they all pass. That's the whole point. But I started looking and going, if I knew the day that I was going to pass, if I knew how old I would be, if I'm 35 now, if I'm 35 and I know I'm going to pass when I'm 40, I'm going to make the most of it. I'm not going to have children because I don't want to bring a child into the world and then leave them when they're 4 years old. That sounds cruel. And I'm not going to necessarily seek out a personal relationship where it's committed with one-on-one with someone that wants a lifelong commitment, because I'm not going to be there the rest of my life. I'm not going to save for retirement because there wouldn't be a retirement because I'd be 40.
You'd make different choices,
I would
right?
make very different choices versus if I knew I was going to live to be 90. I'm going to make different choices. I'm going to save for retirement. I would change careers because everyone knows there's no money in education. And well, that's
but I
kind of
think
where I'm
honestly, at the end of the day, regardless of the date that you would die, I feel it's so important that we honor our true heart alignment and truth and knowing what is going to light our soul on fire, right?
Yeah, and that's really kind of what I took out of it is if I don't know, tomorrow's not promised. And so why would I struggle? Why would I stay in a toxic relationship? Or why would I stay in a toxic job? Or why would I stay in a house I don't like? If I have within my power to the ability to change something, to do something different, to be a different person, to live somewhere else, to find someone that I want to be with, what's stopping me from doing it besides myself? And
that's
so
a huge point, because most people, they stay. And they feel disempowered, like they can't change it, but every single person has the power to change it. And you did. So I know that it's possible because you did all of that.
Yeah, that's the plan, is just to create change. And I know I might not find the right thing right away. Like as far as my career goes, I might take the first job I get if it's what I'm looking for initially. And if I find it's not the right fit, I'm going to keep looking. So
I think that's the point. We need to keep seeking what's aligned for us instead of settling for something that just comes along, because it's up to us to use discernment, right? As we're experiencing opportunity or looking or seeking, it's really up to us to discern, is this going to fuel my soul? Is this going to expand me as an individual and my experience here, or is this going to diminish me and put me back in a box where I'm miserable and controlled?
Yeah, I have a history of making bad personal choices. I stay in relationships way too long. I stay at jobs too long. I overstay, and part of that is because I'm hopeful. I'm positive that things are going to change. Someone else, it's not just me that wants to make a better change for myself, but everybody wants to do that, right? Everybody is willing to do what's best in the situation and not just what's best for themselves. And I don't want to say every single time people choose what's best for themselves, but oftentimes people do. And so
I'm going to say also, Melissa, that you're not alone in staying in these situations because you hold on to the what if. But what if, or they could become ... right? There's, you
There's
see
potential there.
the potential, or you see that it is possible because that person has everything there to become the person you want them to be. It's just that they lack that one thing, which is the desire to become that person you want them to be.
Yeah.
All there in a package. And so you hold on and hope,
Yeah. And there's something to be said for believing someone when they tell you who they really are.
Exactly.
And I've put the blinders on and just ignored completely when someone shows me who they really are, because I go, oh, that's not who they could be. That's not who they want
Let's keep
to
holding
be.
on to the dream, right?
That's not who who they are in my head. And so in my head, there's somebody different. And one of the things I did tell my ex when I ended things was that the person I fell in love with was someone that I made up. It's not something that he, like, because he's like, well, what happened? What's going, what exactly is like, what changed? I'm like, well, honestly, we both did. It's and I got kind of fed up with being strung along. And what I realized is that the man that I had fallen in love with, I had created in my head. That's not who the man I was dating was. It was.
And then there's this constant disappointment, right? Because the reality isn't matching up with the vision, right? Or the dream.
Exactly. Yeah. It was bizarre. And so just realizing, like, as I'm dating, as I'm looking for people that I want to spend my time with, I need to be picky, because what I put out there, it's a lot, and people look at that and go, oh, that's nice. Or I like that. Like, this woman is willing to bend over backwards, or she's willing to do this, or she's willing to do that. And so then people will hold on to me and tell me what they think I need to hear in order to stay.
Right.
And so I need to be picky.
And I think in reality, you deserve better. You're worthy of having a partner that meets you where you are. And I think that's an important part too, because I know that a lot of people know what they want, but sometimes feel like it's impossible because they don't feel like worthy of receiving it. There's like a piece of that. And I'm not saying you specifically, but that is kind of a pattern that I see sometimes, is that people know that they want this, but then sabotage it sometimes, or there's something that happens because they don't feel worthy of actually having it and blow it up somehow. That's a thing too. I'm not saying that relates to
no,
you,
I
but
see that a lot at school, where girls will sabotage their grade in class, or they will kind of sabotage a friendship, and it's because they don't believe that they deserve what's good and what's right. So or what's coming their way.
You probably learn a lot from your students. You're the teacher, but you also learn so much from observing the students and being with them every day. And you probably get a really deep look into just all these patterns, right? With kids.
I do. And it's great whenever I see kids who can kind of step out of their patterns and make changes and do something new. But a lot of them, I see them repeating the same cycles and same things over and over again, or they're repeating patterns that I've seen with their parents.
And that is exactly a good point, because I have found that people repeat what they learn and what they know. And so people always talk about, oh, it's generational, or this is just a thing. And I'm like, maybe it's just a program. Maybe it's the programming. Maybe it's not generational, but people just have learned to parent this way, and the kids turn out this way, and then they grow up and parent that way. Maybe it's a programming thing more than a genetic thing. I don't know,
I don't know. I think there's something to be said about generational trauma. I think there's something to be said about nature versus nurture, and nurture versus nature. Like, it's easy to follow this footsteps or the same path that someone has tread before us, because it's already there.
It's like the template is already laid and you just slide right into it. And I think it takes a lot of courage, because I know both you and I have broken a lot of those patterns and done a lot of inner work to heal ourselves and recognize that we were in these patterns that weren't healthy for us. We've done a lot of inner work. And I feel sometimes when we have the courage to set ourselves free and do that healing work, we are creating a template or example for others to follow us, because even the people who are affected and not really happy with us changing and becoming whole, I noticed that when I was on my healing journey, people who were not affected, who weren't benefiting because I was changing from my behavior, my codependent behavior or whatever, got really triggered by it. I don't know if you've had that experience too, where
I
people
have.
were, yeah.
I don't mean to keep bringing up my ex, but
Well, I mean, that's the most
it's
recent
the
thing
most
that you've
recent,
experienced,
and
right?
he
And
was
so,
emotionally, like, he was stringing me along. He was I was being gaslit, and but it was a power thing for him that he had my feelings.
so what did you learn from all of this? All of these relationship changes, all of this letting go. Like, who are you becoming, and what did you learn from all of these transitions you've been going through?
I feel powerful. Like, really for the first time. I feel like I have realized that I have the power to control my destiny. I can be whatever and whoever I want. I can invest in myself. I can, instead of buying things or like trying to make other people view me as one way or another, I can change the way I see myself. That I see I'm putting in the work, and I see that it's a struggle and that's a hard time, but doing that and investing back in myself makes me the valued commodity. And so I feel I value myself really highly right now in my time.
I love that.
I valued myself before, but not like this. This is a different level of self-worth and self-value that I have not personally experienced before. So,
and from that space, I think you make different decisions because you feel empowered, right? So you're approaching things like, I'm going to look for this job or this relationship, and it's going to have to meet some criteria for me. I'm not going to settle.
Oh yeah, which also means that when I'm talking to someone new, or when I'm applying to jobs, I'm just kind of throwing things out there, and I'm going to be myself. I'm not going to try to present myself in a different way, or kind of tell the person what they want to hear.
I think authenticity is so important, right? And not to filter ourselves or diminish ourselves.
Look and see, does this person meet the requirements that I have for myself? Do they meet are they doing the same? Are they doing self-work? What are they going through? Where are they at in their life? Do they have a similar destination that I'm going to? Or am I just wanting to continue something with them because they have shown me attention?
That's a huge one, right?
I love attention.
Oh, don't we all? Don't we love it? Don't we all love attention? And then you mistake attention for love.
It's really easy to, or whenever someone starts pulling their attention away, you feel like kind of anxious about things, or you just other things will start to slip, and then it all becomes part of a pattern, and it's a landslide. It's not one thing, it's everything, and your life is so terrible, and then you can't do anything because you're in this deep well.
The whole slide into the abyss.
It's a spiral, and I see it in my classroom all the time. We've started where it's like, if you start spiraling, I need you to go for a walk, and so you actually have to leave the classroom, go walk around the school,
interrupt the pattern.
It's a circle, and then you come back. So, and because sometimes, whenever I was in yoga training, we did this thing where Anna Forrest talks about a formula for change, and it's a 4-step process. The first is recognizing that there's a problem. And then it's rewarding yourself for seeing the problem. It's taking a deep breath and then doing something different. And so when I catch my students doing it, and they don't realize necessarily what we're doing, or that I'm stopping their pattern, but telling them, go for a walk, right? Go for a brisk walk and come back. Well, they've reset the pattern, and they've also walked through doorways, and doorways are also a transformational thing. Like, how many times have you gone to the kitchen, like looking for something, and then you've forgotten what it was by the time you get to the kitchen because you've walked through a door? And it's this mental kind of, it's like a mental reset button. And so if you reset, and we've reset 2 or 3 times because they walked out the door and then back into the door, you get a new start. And that's sometimes that's exactly what you need.
It's powerful. And I love that you recognize that and offer that to your students, because a lot of people don't.
Yeah. Or they don't want to reset. If resetting is hard, it means you start over. Even with attitude, it's when I feel really negative, I'm kind of, I used to allow myself to feel it, and to really just, which created like almost like this like cycle of negativity. Like, I was receiving negativity from myself, and so I just kept giving it. And so it was just,
I think that you're so right about the cycle, because I think a lot of people get comfortable there.
It's an echo chamber with
Yeah.
yourself, and all you're hearing are these negative things, and it's really hard to stop the echo.
How
And
did you break
so
that pattern? Because
Mhm.
you've clearly had a huge shift in your mindset.
Yeah,
So how
it's
did you break the pattern? Was it just conscious choosing, or was it just situational or intention? What was it?
it's both. Some of it was intentional. I made the active choice to make some of these changes and to put things in place, and some of them just showed up. I am I'm technically Catholic. I don't necessarily go to mass, but I do believe. And so I realized I'm like at the beginning of the year, or the school year, when everything was falling into place, but falling into the wrong place. And
Mhm.
I had the conversation with my boss about how I feel like this is a Jonah and the whale situation. And I received a message, but I didn't pay attention to it and I didn't speak to it. And so I was in the belly of the whale at this point in time. And there's so many things that are going on. And I feel like I'm finally receiving the message that I finally like have to speak up. And then after that, I got a lot of clarity. And so it was one of these, like,
I mean, when
sometimes
nothing
I have,
changes after you speak up, that's a pretty solid message that it's time to
it,
go.
it really was. And there's a lot of power in bridges and burning bridges. And so I burned a few bridges this fall. And well, I don't recommend it for everybody. It's for me, I have the habit of turning back. I will turn back. I will go back because it's familiar. I will go back because it's comfortable. I like staying in education for as long as I have. I've worked at about 4 or 5 different schools. I stay for about 3 or 4 years and then I move on to the next one because something happened or I just don't feel like it's a good fit anymore. And I realized I'm going to keep doing this as long as I stay in education, because there's inherently problems with the system, not necessarily a problem with me. And I was thinking the problem is me. And so looking at that, realizing I'm like, well, if I want a different result, I have to do something different.
Right, that's true. And I think that's true
Mhm.
for so many people, where they internalize and take the blame of the
Mhm.
situation on as their own, versus like a healthy perspective, which is actually the system's broken.
Mhm.
I'm not broken, the system's broken.
And a lot of me wants
You
to
know?
go, well, then I need to fix the system. I have like I'm part of the system, so I'm part of the solution.
Mhm.
And recognizing the fact that while I'm powerful and I can do all these things and I can make a difference inside, like I can make small differences, I can't make the institutional change that needs to happen.
Correct.
And my voice is loud and I can say things and I can like not be afraid of the consequences. But ultimately, if I'm speaking at the point where I'm unafraid of consequences, I'm unafraid of burning personal and professional bridges, then I'm in the wrong spot. Like
Right.
that's no longer a good fit for me, because
I'm
if I'm
glad you
not
came to that
slightly afraid of
awareness.
it. Mhm.
I'm glad you got to that awareness. And
Yeah,
you know, whatever comes is going to be the right thing, because
I sure
you've
hope so.
certainly worked through all of the wrong. They're not wrong.
Mhm.
They are growth opportunities. Everything that's
Yes.
not aligned is a growth opportunity. And so through the past few years, think
Mhm.
about who you are and how many versions of you you've let go
Mhm.
of, you
And
know.
this job that I'm leaving, like when I got it, it was the perfect spot. Like in the year that I had first interviewed for it, I didn't get the job and I was really upset about it. But then that fall, I went through the traumatic experience with my son and losing him. But I had an emotional support system because I had stayed at my previous job where there were women that I knew that had gone through the same thing, and we are still very close.
No.
Well, the next year when I got the job, it was 2020. And so I ended my public school career from home, working from home because it's because early stages of COVID. And then I started the next school year at a private school where everybody was a lot more supported. I did not have the same kind of problems that a lot of my public school peers did. And it was for the best. I felt supported. I felt welcomed. I felt appreciated. I felt all these things. I felt like I listened to the message and I had followed it and I had put in the work and I was in the right spot. And to be honest, I was in the right spot at that moment in time, but I plan on constantly evolving because I don't think I've peaked yet. And so
I don't think any of us do. I think it's a
no,
constant, life is a constant
yeah.
journey, right? And
Mhm,
and if
mhm,
we're going to grow, we
mhm,
have to constantly expand and
mhm,
invite new things in and move in new
mhm.
directions. And you don't want to stay in a specific grade forever, but some people just
No.
limit themselves, right? And
Mhm.
they just hold themselves in that comfort zone.
There's a lot of things in education that I really appreciate. One of the things that's recently taken kind of been a bigger thing is fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And if you're fixed mindset, that means that you like things as they are, the status quo. You doing the same thing over and over again because it's proven that it has worked, or if it doesn't work, this is the result and it's expected. A growth mindset, you're open to new opportunities, you're open to trying something new, you're open to learning something new. You might have done the same thing 20 different times, but that doesn't mean you always have to do it that way. And so like I've been applying that a lot to my personal life. And also there's a chart, and I can send it to you, about like comfort zone versus growth and learning zones. And so your comfort zone is what's comfortable. It's where you feel supported. It's where you are happy and you know how things are going to go. And the thing is, when you stay in your comfort zone, you're not learning, you're not
That's
growing.
where your
You're
soul
just
dies, basically. In
it's
your
it's
comfort zone.
homeostasis. It's like, things are cycling along, but they're staying the same. And my body is constantly changing. Everyone's body is constantly changing. The body I have right now, whenever I go after, like yesterday, I stepped on my yoga mat, and the body that I stepped on my yoga mat with is not the same body I have today. It's different. I have different sets of cells. I have different patterns. I slept differently last night than I did Sunday night. Like every time I approach the day, I'm approaching it differently, and I'm a little bit older. I have slightly different configuration of cells and of mindset. So, and factors that impact my day. So if I go about things the exact same way every single time, then I'm going to stay the exact same. I'm never going to grow. I'm never going to learn something new. I've learned so many different things about older homes and how to do some home repair things and prioritizing, because when I moved into this house, the air conditioning set unit is a little bit small for the house, but it's fine.
It works.
It works. I've learned about dampers and about what is it, plain boxes or something like that. And I've learned about air intakes because my home is older. I only have one air intake in the central part of my house. I had a guy come out and say, basically, like, you can add another air intake, but you have a little bit of extra space under your doors because that was the compensation in older homes. But you can also add another air intake on top of this. And so I learned how to make a hole in my wall, an intentional hole in my wall. I learned how to use some of the power tools. I learned about drywall saw.
I know
I
who to
learned about
call
all
then.
different kinds of
And
things.
when I get stuck, I'm calling you.
And I made a lot of mistakes. And my dad said that he was going to come and help me because my dad and I are very similar about once we've realized that there's a problem, we're going to solve it. And it doesn't matter how we solve it. If we make a lot of mistakes along the way, we're going to solve it. And at the end, it's going to be just fine. And so it took me about a week because I would do 30 minutes of work on this. And I was cutting a 20-inch by 30-inch hole in my wall.
That's
and so
huge.
it's
Did you
huge.
have studs? Like, how did you do that?
Yeah, I found studs.
Because that's a big gap.
Yeah, it's a huge gap. And because whenever I had peaked and I had moved the lower one, which is a 25 by 20, which is a pretty standard air filter size.
Did you
there
YouTube
were no studs
this?
behind
How do you
it.
even know? I wouldn't even know where to start. I'd be on
I-
YouTube this is beyond the scope of my abilities.
I did watch a little bit of YouTube, but also I was like, well, it can't be that hard. You're just making a hole in the wall. And so I had this blind faith in myself that I was going to do it because I had no other options.
How did
it turn out just fine because it took me a week to do it because I would do it for about 30 minutes at a time, get really frustrated, and then leave and then reapproach it the next day. So I had a really ugly hole in my wall for the better part of a week. But now
that's not bad.
It's great. My air conditioner works a lot better than it did. And because I doubled the air intake to it. So it can move a lot more air. Right. The air, my house is a lot less dusty. When you have 10 dogs in a house, it gets really dusty real quick. So, but it's,
I think it's really important that we challenge ourselves sometimes, and it's okay to make mistakes. And I feel like this is like a metaphor for life. It's okay. I think so many people get into this space of personal judgment, and that there's this negative voice that's critical and constantly self-defeating. And I know it well, because that is a mindset that I experienced before I did all this work, right? To become empowered and aligned with who I am and know who I am. I had to go through that, right? But it's so incredible when you can bridge the gap and put the judgment down and just keep taking that next step and trying something new, and embracing the evolution of you as a person, and looking at all of that as part of the journey instead of something that was negative or part of a shame story or defeat or whatever. It's just part of the journey, right? Is you learn.
Honestly, yeah. And I went into it with the idea of, I'm going to do this. And every time I found, I don't think any part of my house has more studs than that area. I went through 4 studs in 20 inches. Like there was a lot. And so,
How did you, oh my gosh, I can't believe that
I
you
learned how to use
overcame
the
that.
drywall saw because I watched videos on YouTube. I had a hacksaw, and so I used that some of the time. I had a wood chisel, and so there was a good bit when I'd say I could only do it for 20, 30 minutes at a time. I'd be hammering. I had a chisel, and then I would take the frame that I had bought and put it in the wall once I had made the big hole and see, does it fit? If it didn't fit, well, then I have to keep going. And so it took me a long time. There was a lot of I made a lot of mistakes. It's not pretty if you take it off the wall, but you know what? I replaced the one. It works, and I replaced the one underneath it, and it doesn't look any better. And it was done by a professional.
Well, there you go then.
Exactly. So you don't have to be an expert to do something.
It doesn't have to be perfect either, right?
Laying pavers in my backyard. I've done it in layers, and so first thing I've been digging down and digging out because at some point in time my house had a load of dirt dumped in the backyard. The guy I'm dating told me it looked like Mexico, and not in a positive way, because I had a pile of dirt and a bunch of pavers that were just sitting on top of the dirt. And,
I think the important thing here is that you continue to tackle these projects, and also you're learning something through the process, which I think is such a metaphor for life, right? It's like we're constantly learning. We have to be willing to try. And also we're becoming someone by going through the experience, whether it's paving a patio, or cutting holes in the wall, or going through a tough breakup, or whatever the circumstance is, even changing a 15-20 year career. It's going to change you in some way. And I love and honor your journey, Melissa. And I am so grateful that you came into my life when I needed yoga in my life. And your class has always been one of my favorite classes.
Oh, thank you.
Through all my incarnations of yoga, which aren't extensive. I'm not a yogi. I feel like I've been a forever beginner, but I loved the messaging, and I loved that you were always so self-reflective and so vulnerable and honest and authentic. And I think more people could learn from you, because you can come through tragedy, you can come through loss, you can come through struggles in life and still pick up the torch and be empowered and come at life with a full zest for living and a full, I don't know, just belief in yourself with empowerment. And you're such a great example of that. So thank you for being you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's work. Being a human is work. It's work. None of us are made to be perfect, and none of us are made in our final, in our final iteration. Like, we constantly change as kids. Why would we not constantly change as grown-ups? And being an adult, it's constantly changing. But
I love your vulnerability. You're so open about where you're at and how you're approaching life, and you're teaching people. Like, I follow you on Instagram, and you're teaching us all to be a little fearless. Just flying to Istanbul by yourself as a last minute kind of whim, and then seeing all the magic unfold for you through your photos, and then how it changed you coming back. You think you're just doing you, but you are having impact on the people around you. I know people are inspired by your story and by your courage. So I really appreciate you sharing all of it with us here today. Do you have any parting words before we go?
I'll leave you with words that one of my friends who's another yoga teacher left. It's sometimes you have to jump in order for the net to appear. And so if you're on the trapeze, you don't see the net below you, but you do whenever you fall. And so the net is there. You have to trust yourself, and to trust that it's there at the very end. because it is. You're going to make it through. It just might not look like what you expected it would.
Oh my gosh, such awesome parting words of wisdom. Thank you for being here, Melissa. It was an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you.
To my guests and my audience, I hope you guys took some notes, because Melissa shared so many great tips. How to survive transition. That might be the title of the show. Take care of yourselves, love yourselves, and we will see y'all next time. We'll see you later.